Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we continue a topic discussion around equanimity. And today's topic title is Equanimity, the skill behind sustainable success. With our speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. Thank you so much, Vaish, for leading us on to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction and for being here for us all. JM, opening the room, and welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Equanimity is an ongoing discussion. It's one of the qualities we had discussed before the beginning of 2026 as a practice. And there are multiple benefits from such a practice. In a previous discussion, we had talked about guiding the mind. There is guidance for the mind given in the ancient wisdom literatures. We get one mind. It's highly influential on our lives. The state of our mind determines how we see the world, how we react to it, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about others. So equanimity is one of the practices of bringing the mind to a point of clarity. So the world's always changing, and if we try to adapt to every change externally, we'll be in a state of frantic flux. Whereas if we learn how to regulate how the mind reacts to whatever happens to us in the world, we'll find that as observers of the world, rather than considering ourselves to be affected by it, we'll understand the world's moving, but I'm unaffected. This relates to a word that's harmonious with the idea of equanimity, which is aloofness. We've talked about it previously. Aloofness means that we're able to be witnesses of what's happening externally, and rather than thinking it's happening to us, observing that it's happening, but we're still whole in and of ourselves as the observers. We're not affected by the world. This is one of the main themes of the Bhagavad Gita. And to start today, just to come into a state of mindfulness, I've already changed my microphone to original sound for musicians, and I'm going to turn on some drone in the background for meditation. And let's just take a couple minutes to experiment with aloofness, which will include sitting up a little straighter than you were a second ago. Straightening the spine gives a sense to our nervous system that we're going to concentrate. Try closing your eyes. The eyes are part of the Gyanendriyas, or the knowledge-gathering senses. And if you just close them for a moment and then literally turn your vision inwardly, you'll find that, like looking into the ocean, there's more life in the ocean than there is on the shore or in the world outside the ocean, and there's more life inside us than there is outside. And for a moment, just listen to this drone. And bring your awareness to your breath. Breath regulates our minds. If you take a pattern of 4 counts on the inhale and 6 on the exhalation, and just count 4 in, 6 out, and relax, but keep an alert mind. And as you're in the state of awareness, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Do you feel that any stress you feel at work comes not from the work itself, but from how things turn out? Does your stress come from the work itself or from how things turn out after doing the work? And please think of a recent situation at your work that triggered stress. Don't analyze it yet. Just hold it in your mind. Today we'll be talking about a core idea of samatvam, which means even-mindedness. Samatvam literally means equanimity, equal in all circumstances. In the ancient wisdom literature Bhagavad Gita, the person who can remain equal-minded, even-minded, when there are causes for happiness or distress, fear and anxiety, is properly situated in yoga or connection with his or her higher self. Equanimity doesn't mean indifference. It means emotional stability plus clarity under pressure. And the practice of aloofness, remembering any stressful situation that you've experienced recently, step back from it and observe it as if it's happening to someone else. And what advice would you give that person who's undergoing this stressful situation? Notice that you have the opportunity at any moment to objectify the life situation that you're experiencing at any moment. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions that a person who's able to step back from the mind that's always turning and notice that the mind is a machine, albeit a subtle one, that's constantly producing ideas. And we don't have to embrace each idea that's produced from the mind. And then he says, learn how to feel whole as the observer. Whatever happens in the world comes and goes. You're already something. You don't have to become something else. You can feel satisfied in yourself. Because as a conscious being, you have everything you need. Now bring your awareness back to your breath. And then you can wiggle your fingers and toes. Realize that you have an external body that you're residing within, and then come back into the Zoom room. Open your eyes. And welcome back. So the idea of equanimity is natural because the world's always changing, but as a conscious being, we're the same. And it's only when we identify with the changes of the world, the life situation, as when we might, in a dream, identify with the goings on and then feel that we're being pursued perhaps by a tiger or a person who wants to harm us. But then when you wake up, you realize that actually none of this is pertinent. It's a phantom. So through equanimity, we can become more observant that the world's always changing, moving, and that our awakening is in understanding how we're aloof from the external goings on in the world. And Charles had a dream like that last night. I have them regularly about trying to catch a flight and not being able to find my ticket. But when I wake up, I realize everything can be handled. So here is a idea that comes from the Bhagavad Gita, that when you think about it and you practice it even slightly, you'll notice that you feel better about your life and you're more effective. And that is to become equal in both success and failure. That may sound counterproductive, but actually it's not. Because our stress spikes when we become emotionally invested in outcomes. And so you may say, well, I need outcomes. I have to have deliverables and so forth. Okay, that's true. But how can one best engage with producing results, deliverables, without spiking stress? Well, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, be more attentive to your duty. And that is the process. He says specifically, perform your duty, abandoning attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. So the definition of yoga is skill in living and working without being attached to the result. So I have a question. First of all, what changes at work if you give 100% effort, but stop tying your self-worth to the result? What are some of the changes that you give 100% to, or the aspects of your work that you think you could perform as duty without tying your self-worth to the work, to the outcome of the work? Just think about that, because it's the essential aspect of Krishna's definition of yoga, which means be dutiful, be attentive to the process, but then don't become attached to the result of your work and invested in it. First of all, how does that strike your ear? so we can get a feedback from you about what that sounds like to you. If it sounds like a stretch, does it sound hard, easy? On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 means it's very difficult. 1 means maybe I could experiment with that. Our phone lines are open. What would it feel like to you to do the next task you're doing?
Radha Kripa says 3.
It's a 3. Okay. Anybody else? Let's see those numbers. Panda says 4. Olivia 5. Xiaomei says 4. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more, and then we'll come to a point of getting some more feedback from you. Have you ever come across leaders who don't panic? Have you ever worked with somebody who could work under pressure without panicking? Yes or no? Have you ever seen somebody like that? Had somebody in your life, you've observed such a person who's in highly stressful situations, but no, Nicholas said, but didn't panic.
Nicholas says no. Heidi says yes.
Can you tell us who it was or what the circumstances were?
Heidi said yes.
That's why I was asking her if she, can you tell us anything about the quality of the person or how you noticed, where you noticed such a person who didn't panic under pressure? What were the circumstances? I think you have everybody muted, JM. They can't talk.
I'm sorry. Let me try.
Unmute. Let them unmute if they wish to.
Um,
I can share a little bit. I'm just a little under the weather, but yeah, I think they had been through a lot, and so a few things you know shook them. Yeah,
Did
in
it,
life.
what were your observations? Were they able, by equanimity, not becoming panicked and overwrought in the situation? Did it help in de-escalating the conflict? Did it invite collaboration or did it help make clearer decisions?
Yes to all of those. Yeah, I think there was a sense of acceptance to the outcome.
Thank you very much for coming on, even though you don't feel well. Very helpful. Um, Bhakti Mateus, who did you see working in such a way that it was noticeable that they didn't panic under pressure, and what were the effects?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. The only person I can think right now is Srila Prabhupada in his life and how he was or when he arrived to America. So many challenges came upon him, and he was always equipoised, and he was doing his duty as the servant of his spiritual master.
Okay. I had such an experience with a colleague of mine with whom I was working on a highly contentious legal situation that was high risk. And to me, it seemed like there were very little gain. Nonetheless, it was my duty. I had to deal with it. And because the person had, not just because the person had a lot more experience, but because the person had practiced equanimity in his life. And luckily, I was partnered with him in the project. I noticed that going into every conversation, he remained equipoised and only dealt with the facts at hand without becoming overly anxious about the outcome. And I noticed that he did this over several months. just showed up. The way I described it to others was came with his lunchbox. He dealt with the situation as duty. And one of the reasons it left such an impression on me was I saw ultimately everything worked itself out. Well, it didn't work itself out. The ongoing negotiations helped, but there was a favorable conclusion at the end. And I had thought about the way in which this person had conducted himself through the whole process. And I had also heard in the context of a dialogue I had heard when somebody was asked, "Aren't you nervous or afraid?" And he said, "Why? Would that help? Would it help if I became more nervous or overly concerned? Or would it help if I just did what I could with what I have right now?" So oftentimes there's a palpable result in remaining equipoised, doing one's duty without becoming overly concerned with the result, doing what you can with what you have now. I mentioned these three features. One is it tends to de-escalate conflict. Another is that it invites collaboration. And a third is we're able to make clearer decisions without becoming biased or because we want to see a particular result, we deal with what we can in the moment. And that emotional regulation, which equanimity could be described as emotional regulation, becomes contagious. Have you ever been in a dialogue with somebody that's close to you? And oftentimes, as I've heard and experienced myself, if you're close to somebody day to day, maybe even live together, travel together, and then you have a conversation, emotions can flare. But if one or the other remains equipoised in the conversation, then it tends to spread to the other person as well. Where as if both people become overly stressed in the way they talk, even there are machines that measure the stress level in your voice. Have you ever seen that? You've never seen it, JM? There's technology that measures if a person is stressed when they speak. It's very subtle, but sometimes they can tell if somebody's telling the truth or not because of the quality of their voice. And so, equanimity, when a person remains emotionally regulated, that spreads to the other person or the other people in the room or the other people in the project. One person can create that sense of calm and being present. I mean, it's one thing to sit down and meditate and bring your mind to a point of awareness and being in the present, but it's another to do it when you're working in a stressful situation or if somebody accuses you unnecessarily or maybe says something to you that might be agitating. Let's see, JM, what Ariana has to say.
She is asking, how does one cultivate and maintain emotional regulation? What does that look like day to day?
Okay, so one of the first elements given in the Bhagavad Gita is to focus on duty. Duty is a very high-minded word and concept. Don't think of the outcome. So this is what's known as karma yoga. You work as a duty. You've been given a certain task to perform. Don't worry about the outcome. This is another level of consciousness. And the core teaching of the Bhagavad Gita about karma yoga could be described as excellence in action without obsession over results. be excellent in action. If you look at, for instance, a ballet, the dancer is striving for gracefulness, which requires practice and precision in the way he or she moves. Not thinking so much about the outcome, but being in the moment of the dance. And similarly, when we work, if we're concerned more with how can I do this in the best way, with finesse, being prepared, and so forth, and then letting the result come of its own accord. So let's unpack that in a minute. Since I'm talking about something very practical to answer you, Ariana, the Gita would say, focus on the quality of the effort and the integrity of the process. What's the quality of your effort? And what's the integrity of the process that you're using? What to let go of? That's what to focus on. What to let go of is, for instance, as particulars, I'm fixated on a promotion, or I make the quarterly results my identity. That's how it defines me. So in a very, very practical, granular way, in the idea of karma yoga, it means to think more. How can I increase the quality of what I'm doing? And how can I have integrity while I'm doing it? And not so much what the outcome's going to be. What's the reward at the end? Another way to say it is to control what's in your control and let the rest unfold. So there is an unfoldment in this world, and even with the best laid plans, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the result that you want. But if you had integrity in the process and you focused on the quality of your effort, then there's nothing to lament. So we can't control the outcomes. See, on the stage that was set for the Bhagavad Gita to be spoken, there's a warrior who's known as the best of all warriors, martial artist, trained from when he was a child. And he's put into an impossible situation. When the two armies face one another, he sees that there are many of his friends and relatives on the opposite side. You see how that can happen in this world. Those who you thought were friends, they become enemies. And this warrior, Arjuna, was known for his high-mindedness. But just before the battle, he lost his nerve. Highly uncharacteristic of him. And that's when his chariot driver spoke the wisdom literature of Bhagavad Gita. Now, how does this pertain to all of us? We're in the battle of life. We align ourselves a certain way, we plan for certain things, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to line up the way we thought they would. But still we have to do our duty, and that was Krishna's instruction to Arjuna. He was fighting to protect the innocent at a time when those who would usurp the rightful property and rulership of other that were granted to the pious Pandavas, there were some evil designs on disrupting that. So Arjuna was supposed to protect Dharma, which means truth and doing the right thing. But then he thought, this is very inconvenient to be in this situation. So Krishna advised him at that time of the science of karma yoga. Do your duty. Don't consider loss, gain, victory, or defeat, but do what's right. That's one of the very loose definitions of Dharma, do the right thing. And that's what I meant when I spoke of, from my notes earlier, about integrity. Keep your integrity. Don't try to cut corners and be more efficient and try to engineer the outcome. You can't. you can do the best you can with what you have at the moment. And part of doing that, here's part of the mindset that can be very helpful, is this meditation that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, that success and failure are both part of a larger plan. They're not personal verdicts about you as a person. As my teacher used to say, failure may not be detrimental, it may become the pillar to success. So this is what the advice is in Bhagavad Gita. Don't consider loss, gain, victory, or defeat. Do your duty. Can you think of any place where you worry more about the outcome than you do about the execution? I'm asking these questions, not getting a lot of responses because maybe they're a little tough to answer, but think about it.
In, in general, like in the relationship, when the relationship is very dear, then you are emotionally invested. You want to make sure the relationship lasts long. So that typically has an effect on the process and how you approach it.
That's such a good example. And maybe there's a time when you do the right thing, you keep your integrity in the relationship. Even though the immediate result isn't there, you can see in the future how things come back around where somebody noticed that you kept your integrity. They went through what they had to go through, and then they come back and they remembered that you stayed the same. You didn't cut corners. And that thickens the relationship. Let's hear what Ariana has to say.
Yeah, Ariana says, so sorry for the follow-up question. How do you identify your duty? How do you know what your duty is? Also understand if this is too off topic and we can save it for another time. Haha.
No, it's right on topic. And I'm inviting all questions and all reflections, anything you all want to say at this at any time. It's a free room. Please feel free to put anything in the text, raise your hands. All questions will be entertained. Duty. Well, we have duties on different levels. There are definitions of duties as, let's say, a child to your parents or parents to your children, duties to friends. We have duties to our own body, to take care of it. It's a gift. We may have duties in the course of doing our work because when we're in this world, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, there's no exception. You have to work. Even in the simplest of circumstances, let's just say you're sowing a few seeds and you live a simple life, you still have to do your duty by planting and the right season and reaping at the time when the harvest comes. So in the overall conception of duty, there are divisions. And if we think about which duty we're performing at any given time and why we're performing it, it can be very helpful. So for instance, why are you working? Because you have to maintain yourself, and that's reasonable because you have to keep body and soul together somehow or other. And so that's how we can understand, is by looking at each individual circumstance and seeing that. But the overarching way that we can understand is if we have a clear idea about the ultimate purpose of our life. That becomes the North Star. As if we don't have that, then it's harder to tell what our duty is at any given time because it becomes relative. So in the sages, 5,000 years ago, there's a dialogue between sages in a forest called Naimisharanya, in which they were discussing this very question. How do you know what your duty is? They said, start with understanding the importance of human life and what the ultimate purpose of it is. And according to these sages, human life has an ultimate purpose, which is to come to know your true self. When I say true self, we have a temporary identity right now, which is if you ask somebody, who are you? They might say, well, I'm American, or they may say, I'm a man, I'm a woman, or somebody else might say, I'm a cat. Somebody else might say, I'm a squirrel. And that's a temporary identity. So the sages then say, there's an identity that is beyond just the temporary designation of the body. Because after all, this body changes. Which you are you as the body? People may see you at intervals and say, oh, you've changed so much. You used to be a little child, and your duty as a child was to just play. And now you're an adolescent, so your duty is to attend to your education. So our duties change according to the body. But what the sages say is understand that the ultimate duty of every person is to come to understand that we have an identity that transcends the body. And even when this body goes, or we go from the body, that identity continues. So they said, first understand that. And then you'll have a clearer idea of how to perform other duties in the course of your life, which are constantly changing, because you'll want to connect those to the ultimate duty that you do. Hope that wasn't too convoluted, but that's the basic principle, Ariana, of duty, according to the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you. Okay, another aspect. We talked about doing your duty in your work and doing it in a way that you're equipoised. So the basic principle of being equipoised in work or in duty, in whatever duty you're doing as a parent, as a child, as a person who works in the corporate world or anywhere else, is to perform your work without being overly concerned with the result. That means artfully perform your duty, be completely prepared for it, and look at the quality of your work and the integrity of your work, but not being attached to the outcome. And also not only thinking of the outcome, let that come as a result of the process that you're invested in. Second one is tolerance of dualities. This is called titiksha. And this tolerance of dualities is a recognition that life swings between opposites. Have you ever been praised and then you felt exhilarated and then you felt you were blamed for something and then you felt morose? Anybody been praised or blamed in their lives?
Yes,
Yes, who said? Nirali said you've been praised or blamed. How did you feel?
yes. I think sometimes you think you have reached that milestone where you can be equipoised, but when situation comes, I realize that I'm not that equipoised. I had to raise my voice or, say it differently. Um, Even though I didn't have anything particular outcome, I will not say I think I was avoiding the conflict. That's the other problem. I realized that I don't like conflicts, but to help and support sometimes the right person, like how Arjuna had, right? He to support for the right cause, you have to raise your voice and things. And I realized that I had to raise my voice, and then having that duality, right? Like didn't stay equipoised, or um, and like you said, when somebody praises and then somebody blames, then you feel like ego hurt, right? Basically, praise it's okay. You're like, okay, I don't take that. But when somebody blames, I go into that sad that, hey, how can I do this, right? So, or how can I not be liked? And that's the other, I think it's the liking or the things that, small things that you don't realize that hurts your ego.
Thanks, Nirali, for that testimonial of your realization. It definitely matches mine. And this is one of the practices. When we say, how do you practice equanimity? Is to be ready for these circumstances. You consider it ahead of time. First of all, things are never as good as they seem or as bad as they seem. And there's a kind of karma in the universe. What goes around comes around. A friend of mine once said, if you take credit for things that you didn't do, the karma is you'll get blamed for things you didn't do. And being equal in both of them, sometimes you're praised by somebody and then later on they take it back or they blame you for something else. And so one of the ideas of this tolerance of dualities is to be equal in praise and blame, fame, infamy. They can come and go. People are famous for some time and then somebody digs up something in their past and then they're canceled. And all that fame is gone in one day. And so the self-realized person understands that things come and go. And therefore they have this mentality of the world and the circumstances and the praise and blame, the victory, defeat, the gain and loss that come to me are just like seasons. We can't control them. We can stay in duty, but we can't control the outcomes. And just as we tolerate the weather, so similarly, or do we tolerate the weather? Maybe we don't. We have to learn to tolerate the extremes in weather, but also in what happens to us in this lifetime. Okay, go ahead, Jan. We got another question coming up from Bhakti Mateus.
Yeah, so Bhaktamate is saying, how can we be satisfied with our work and its result while trusting that our current position is due to providence?
While trusting that our current position is due to providence. Providentiality takes a little consideration, but in general, and in a very general way, everything is providential. This is one of the messages of the Bhagavad Gita. Everything that happens for a reason. Let me just put it in that vernacular form. Everything that happens for a reason. That could be under the umbrella of providential. So wherever we are right now has a cause. Nothing's random. And in the Bhagavad Gita says, if we trace it back and back and back and back, we could find a cause to why we're in a particular body that we're in now, why we have a certain amount of what we have or don't have. This is all caused by the carry through from what we've been doing. And what we're doing now will create what we have in the future. But it's very complex because we can't remember all the things we've done, not just in this lifetime, but in previous lifetimes. And so how can we be satisfied with the work is by seeing that we're doing it with integrity. We've been given a certain situation in life, and when we especially offer it in service, this is the panacea, when we have mentality that we do work, but we don't connect ourselves with the result. So what do you do with the result? You offer it as a kind of sacrament. You say, here, I'm offering this to the Supreme. I'm doing my best with what I have, and I'm offering it up to the higher person, the Supreme Person. And this is the prescription from the Bhagavad Gita: do things out of service, not for personal gain. Obviously, personal gain will come and go, but when you're in that mentality of service, then you'll never be out of balance. Shall we call on Radhakripa?
Yes.
I just thought to share when I was unfairly blamed for something, and that happened a couple of years ago, 3 years maybe. Uh, I mean, I was like really honestly mad. And rather than responding to that one, I thought to write the real sequence is what happened. That is not the truth, what I was told. So in that process of writing, I think I slows down a little bit. And I didn't send that email because I heard from you telling that, it's whatever you do. I followed somehow, I don't know, via some arrangement, I didn't send it. And next day morning, I felt like it may be birth, but it is not that birth which I was thinking about yesterday. And 2 days later, I just didn't, think about sending it. I said I might send it later on, but not right now. And maybe I think 6 months ago, I actually saw that email in my inbox as a draft. And I was like thinking, I'm glad I didn't send it. Because over the period of time, but I noticed it, things have moved on. So I was just thinking about the immediate reactions. We really need solid guidance as we get from you. And that saves us from adding more to the miseries where we are already in this material world. So really appreciate your guidance. Thank you.
Thanks, Radhakripa. I love what you said. The observation things had moved on, and that's one of the very simple but profound ideas. This too shall pass. If we can keep that in mind, that's part of equanimity. Don't overreact to circumstances, and things always fall into their right place ultimately. Now, when it comes to the question, this is an excellent question. Hetty is asking about how would you recommend we set goals without attaching to the outcome? And that goes to the conception I mentioned before. It's highly efficient, and we even have goal setting here before the new year, remember? So it's not that we don't set goals, we just live an open life, whatever happens, happens. That's not the idea. It's more the intention of why we're setting goals and what we do with the result when we get it. We offer it to the Supreme. That's the idea. So when you find Arjuna being victorious, he doesn't say it's because I'm so great. He said it's because I was empowered by Krishna to do this. And those who are excellent in anything and achieve benchmarks in their lives, they remain unattached from them, saying, I'm only an instrument. I was able to achieve this because such and such empowered me to do it. For instance, people get up from an Academy Award. What do they say? It was my wife and my producer and my co-star actor. And so I did what I could. But that's the idea behind those who set goals. They have lofty goals in life, in fact, because they understand anything's possible because it's not me doing it. I'm an instrument, but they offer it up. Shall we call on Manu JM?
Yes, so I have this follow-up question also. Like, we have these, what Heidi mentioned, like, we do set goals and we are also working to just be an instrument. But then, does anxiety, we also get anxious, or, we have this anxiety, will we meet our goals, or will this be possible? How does that play a role, or like, should we just be detached, like, um,
Well, it has a different quality, the anxiety, that is, when we know we're doing it for someone else. In other words, when we're offering the result to our higher power, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, offer it to the Supreme. Don't keep it for yourself and claim that you're the doer. As soon as you claim you're the doer, you have to take all the results, and you don't want that. You offer the results up. And so the kind of anxiety you have in working for somebody else's ultimate happiness. For instance, let's say you're going to get a gift for somebody, and you're only thinking, how can I get the perfect gift for that person? I want to please them. The anxiety that you take for that is very different than the anxiety that you take for getting it for yourself. That's why in an interview of 55,000 students in Canada, I did this research for my book I wrote a few years ago. 95% of them said it's better to give than receive. I think, why? The experience is very different. And the ultimate idea of bhakti yoga is this is the standard of higher consciousness, is you're doing things not for yourself, but for others. And does it mean you live a life of depravity? Not at all. In fact, the example is when you water the root of a tree, all the leaves and branches become naturally satisfied. And we're part of a larger entity. We're one part of it. And when we learn this principle of giving, by giving you grow, by being selfless, your real self comes out. This is called karma yoga. You work for a higher purpose. And they're all the same emotions. There's a verisimilitude to the emotions. They look like ordinary emotions, but they're not. And that's when Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that you're living like a lotus, which lives in the water, but it's impervious to water. It sounds paradoxical. But those who have a different intention for their work, they're doing it for a higher purpose, out of service. They're not touched by the same kind of anxiety that burns people to the core. Their anxiety is exhilarating. It's a different quality, although it looks exactly the same. Let's see. Charles had his hand up, didn't he?
Yeah.
And then he
Charles,
got
do you want to
away.
go ahead?
Where did he go?
Oh, sorry. It was by accident, but I'll come on and say hello. And I'm
Hey,
so
Charles.
enjoying this, as I'm sure everyone is. This is it's always just so grateful to be here and to have access to this space. And I feel so privileged that my ears, my body, can all feel this, and hopefully throughout the rest of my day, I'm able to carry this forward, not just for myself, but in all my interactions to help other people feel better and experience life better because of everything I'm getting here. So thank you so much, Vaisesika Prabhu and JM and everyone else who's here, making this space amazing. My cup it's exploding. It's more than full.
Thanks, Charles. I've noticed that's how you move about the world, and it's
Thank you.
highly effective. Case in point. Case in point. Let's
There's,
see. Yes, go ahead, Jam.
there is a question from Panda who asked, is there an initial cause or does it regress infinitely?
And it depends on what your definition of it is in this context. What is it? Is there an initial cause or does what regress infinitely? Panda, go ahead.
Uh, you were just saying, I guess, previously that, something happens and it's because of something before or it has a cause. Some just philosophical question, but like, how
Yeah.
far back does that go? And is there
Well,
like,
yes. Well, one thing is we're dealing with two measurements. One is unmeasurable and the other is slightly measurable. In the realm of time and space, which has to do with our body definitely has we have it when we identify with the body, there's definitely a sense of time and space. In fact, if I went back to my own home that I grew up in, which is not possible anymore because somebody else lives there, but you'd find footprints of, my parents' children on the ground measuring when they were in kindergarten, 5 years old, in the cement and notching how tall we are at a certain year. And that those linear measurements of our bodies are is one aspect of tracing something back. But in the realm of consciousness, of which uh, coming to our real self beyond the body, we're conscious beings, we're personal, and we just happen to have assumed this temporary identity right now. And however, that is very difficult to trace out. However, ontologically, the phenomena of consciousness means there are certain characteristics. One is free will. And free will is extremely interesting and highly consequential. Where we decide to point our attention at any given time will determine what happens next or how we're situated. So there is a sense of causality in where have I used my free will? How have I used my free will? And this is the crux of the matter is that we're conscious beings. And we, for instance, when we ignore something, there's a certain darkness that comes in. Like if you ignore another person, there's a kind of darkness in your relationship or in your own consciousness. So there is causality that we can trace back. At some point, I used my free will, pointed my attention in a different direction, and this is where I ended up. Uh, because consciousness drives the external world, not the other way around. It's not that we're subjected to the outside world, we subject ourselves to it by our choices and how we use our conscious mind and our free will, which is driven by free will. Thank you for such an interesting question, Panda. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the answer.
Mayank said, don't put the cart before the horse. I concur. That's such a good metaphor, and I think of it all the time. It really is helpful. Jam, I have 2 minutes left, and I have one more thing to talk about, and that is mind management. Mind management is part of equanimity. We have to manage our mind. It doesn't become disciplined by itself. We have to make plans for it. And there's a story in the Srimad Bhagavatam which talks about the Avanti Brahmana who was a very wealthy person. Then he lost all his wealth. And after doing that, he had this urge in his heart to become self-realized and rise beyond the dualities of the world. And he gave many different instructions about how to manage the mind. And one of the metaphors that he gives, since I barely have any time left, which is one I keep with me all the time. Has anybody here ever accidentally bitten their tongue? Or am I the only one who does that regularly? I hate it worse. Well, I wouldn't say I hate it worse than anything. I'd hate more if somebody else bit me. But, the thing is, the Avanti Brahmana says, who do you blame when you bite your own tongue? You can scream an explication to the universe, like, why? And then it's like, no, you bit your own tongue. So he was observing his own lot in life, and he was saying, whatever I've come to, I've come to because of my own choices. And he chose, did the Avanti Brahmana, to become highly introspective and to see whatever is happening to him, happiness, distress, deliberately seeing how he could take the lesson from that and how it was purifying him in times of challenge, and also how he should see that whatever gain that came to him was a gift from above, and he didn't become overly attached in any circumstances. It's an interesting story to read, and I think I'd like to go into it in a little more detail later. But suffice it to say, there are means by which one can manage one's own mind. The topics of that are in the Bhagavad Gita. The simplest explanation of that is to be aware that you're not your mind, as we did in the very beginning of this program. Observe how when you don't give in to every impulse of the mind to say something, do something, you may notice the result you didn't get from doing that. And that may give more impetus to be restrained and to be equipoised. And I like the example if you wrote a draft letter to excoriate somebody for their transgression, and then you read it 2 days later, as Radhakripa said, and you say, "Oh, I'm glad I didn't do that." And we can be glad we didn't do a lot of things if we become a little more aware of managing our mind and not letting it rule us, but let us be ruled by a higher principle, and that is to find the balance in all circumstances, which is called equanimity. That's all we have for today. We had a little bit of a discussion. I think we got off the ground. We got a little bit of momentum, and we picked up some speed. And maybe there's some lessons to take away, but I definitely feel edified by hearing what you all had to say. And thanks for continuing this discussion about equanimity. Thanks a lot, JM, for keeping the lights on for us. Don't think we don't notice how you're a pillar and you keep things going. And all of you, fantastic. You know, I just thought of a really joyful way to say goodbye for this time. And I learned it from our friends in the Himalayas who live in caves and meditate. They put their hands high in the air and they say this phrase, Hari Bol, which means keep the vibration going, the transcendental vibration going, because that's the most important one. And they put their hands up and they just say it to each other. I have this strong impulse to do it right now. I think I'm going to do it. You can do it if you want. Hari Bol!
Haribo!
Haribol.
See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.